Um, Good morning, welcome to the Cabinet meeting. As usual, this is being broadcast live via the County Council's website and it will be archived so you can view it afterwards. Would everyone please remember to switch their microphones on before they speak and turn it off when they finish speaking. So apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Mr. Rushton and Mr. O'Shea, and I've just been informed that Mr. Payne is running slightly late, so hopefully he will be here soon. So item 1 is the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 10. So I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of June 2024 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 2, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest in respect of any items on the agenda?
Can I just, Chair, say I am a member of Blaby District, so the confidential item as agenda item 18, I'd just declare an interest, but it's obviously a long term.
Thank you, that's noted. Any other declarations? No. Okay, on to item 4, the medium-term financial strategy budget.
Just to say that my husband is leader of Blaby District, so just in case anything crops up, I'm just being open and upfront.
Okay, thank you. So our first item is the medium-term financial strategy, budget monitoring and MTFS refresh on pages 11 to 62. So this report provides an update on the County Council's short and medium-term financial position in light of the current economic climate, seeks approval for changes to the previous agreed 2024-28 capital programme, provides an update on the MTFS revenue budget monitoring position as of the end of period 4, and seeks approval for the forecast net revenue budget underspend to be used to increase the capital programme risk contingency. The Scrutiny Commission considered the report at its meeting on the 4th of September, and a draft minute has been attached to the order paper marked 4. Declan Keegan, Director of Corporate Resources, will present the report, and then I'll ask Lee to speak as lead member.
Thank you, Chair. So, as mentioned, this report provides information on the budget monitoring for the current financial year based on the information up to the end of period 4, which is July. It also provides information on the wider context nationally, financially, in respect of local government, and specifically the potential risks and issues emerging that will shape our approach to refreshing the MTFS. A summary of the current revenue forecast is set out on the table in paragraph 23 and shows that we're expecting to sort of land on budget as a council. Although, as to be expected, there are several variances at the departmental level. There is a mixed picture, in particular on social care. So children's social care is, in particular continues to be concerned, with rising demand and a 9 million forecast overspend. Whilst residential placements numbers are rising, there are some signs that weekly costs are starting to reduce. The high needs deficit continues to be a concern, with expenditure expected to exceed the grant received by £23 million for the year, which compares to the budgeted deficit of £17 million. If this position doesn't change, the cumulative deficit will be around £64 million by the end of this financial year. Clarity on SEND reform and a solution to the deficit will be important for the Council's long-term stability. Adult social care, however, is showing a reduction in demand and is forecasting an underspend of £12.7 million. There are initial indications that demand has started to pick up, and this will continue to be monitored closely as the year progresses. Inflationary pressures are easing, and we're not expected to use all the inflation allowance that was made in the budget, although we're still waiting confirmation of the staff pay award. We continue to benefit from a boost to our lending income from higher than expected interest rates, and have maintained a sort of a higher than expected position throughout this year. An additional £5 million is expected to be received this year above the budgeted allowance. Several capital pressures are outlined in the report, both increased costs and potential for reduced funding. So an additional allowance of £6.3 million will be made to the capital risk contingency to ensure that funding is available if no other way to mitigate the increases are found. The overall impact of these variants mean that at this stage we won't need to use the £6 million of reserves that was originally included in the budget when set in February to close the budget gap, which is a very positive position. Turning to capital, a review of the programme has been undertaken that identifies that the 4-year programme should be increased from £447 million to £494 million, which is similar to what was expected in period 2 due to the rephasing of schemes primarily from last financial year. The Melton Mowbray Distributed Road North East scheme is overspent and is of particular concern, and options to mitigate the cost increase are still being considered, including discussions with the contractor. The existing capital contingency and further risk allocation I mentioned will provide additional budget cover for the scheme. An update on the solar farm at Quorn is included in the report. Whilst the original intention was to directly fund the scheme and retain an ongoing interest, we have not been able to get comfortable with the risks involved. The recommendation is that the site is marketed for sale or lease. It is still hoped the site will be developed as a solar farm, but if this does not present the best value option for the council, other options will need to be considered. Looking ahead, the MTFS position is currently being refreshed and assumptions around savings, growth, funding and inflation are being reviewed. This will take place over the autumn with the draft budget expected to be presented in December Cabinet. Based on current trends, the gap over the MTFS period could still be in the region of £100 million, plus the high needs deficit mentioned earlier. Social care demand and pay costs continue to be the biggest issues for the council, as well as capital pressures. There is even greater level of uncertainty with the new government, and we await the Chancellor's budget announcement on the 30th of October to provide further details on local government funding, although this is only expected to provide information for a single-year settlement. With the position that the national finances are in and demands for financial support from across the public sector, we should be prepared for a difficult settlement. We cannot be complacent and need to keep a focus on the financial position. Getting into financial difficulty doesn't result in additional government help, just additional cost to dig yourself out of the situation. The recommendations are set out on the order paper.
Thank you. Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank Declan and his team for all the work that they keep doing on this difficult area for us. The revenue position shows an overall break-even forecast, but there are trends emerging in social care, with children and family services showing an overspend of 9 million and adult social care reporting an underspend of 12.7 million. We are anticipating an underspend in our inflation contingency. Interest rates have stayed higher for longer, leading to additional investment income. We have continuing pressures in the capital programme, as Declan's outlined, with the MMDR overspend now at 18 million, although we are still working with the contractor to find other cost savings. We have removed the forecast increased income from Network North in future years due to increased uncertainty over this funding pending the budget on 30th of October. We do need and would ask for clarity from the new government on this. We have shown an additional £6 million worth of contributions to capital reserves to provide further contingency for the Eltham Mowbray Distribute Road and also other capital funding risks. The report, as Declan's outlined, gives an early update on the MTFS position. We continue as an authority to deliver the savings as well as plan our business to deliver further planned savings, but it is getting increasingly harder. Our ask of the new government through our Leicestershire MPs is to level with us as to their intended plans on funding. We need a clear roadmap of plans to allow all upper tier authorities to plan and deliver our services. The spending review starting in the autumn needs to deliver for the government its intentions to deliver its manifesto commitments made to the residents of Leicestershire. We cannot deliver services such as social care, improved roads and public health services and improved bus services without the right funding needed to those departments. Because we have changed governments, we are still needing fair funding and will still chase this need. Happy to propose the recommendations on the order paper, Chair.
Thank you. James?
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second this. And if I could just make a few comments at the same time. I think the fact that we're managing to be on track with the budget despite the inordinately difficult circumstances is absolutely to the officers' credit and to the credit of this authority. We all know the problems that exist sort of with local government finance, that ultimately that we can't control demand, and we can't control the number of customers that we have, whilst not being able to raise enough money to match that. And that's a structural problem across the whole of local government, not just here. So I really want to make my first comment here as a cabinet member that I think government nationally needs to decide what it wants local government to look like and fund it properly, because at the moment it's just not fit for purpose in terms of the way that they're funding us. And I'd be especially upset to hear if we end up getting the Network North money cut as well. Again, that's money that was promised to our people, to our residents, and if that's again, if one of the first actions of this new government is to cut further from what we have, that's something that absolutely would be to the detriment of people in Leicestershire and my residents.
Christine?
Thank you, Deborah. Yes, thank you, Declan, for that. And as you stated, that the adult is 12.7 million underspend, and I am aware that it won't be that at the end of the financial year. But I think thanks must be given to the staff in the department of how hard they've worked, especially to the appraisal team that are looking at what residents are entitled to, and we're making sure that they get what they want, but not get too much that it costs the county too much. So thank you very much.
And just to echo some of the comments that have been said, I mean, we've heard about the pressures on social care, both adults and children, and obviously on the SEND deficit, which I think is very, very worrying for us about what the end of that deficit is for us, because we can't afford to fund that ourselves from what we've got. But I think we're hearing now that, you know, other areas of our work that we do, that we provide services for our residents who is in a real fragile position unless this new government looks very closely at local authority funding in their budget. They need to ensure that they do address the funding shortfalls, not just for us, but for many other local authorities, especially the county shires that are really struggling with their reality of delivering services in a very wide area compared to what a city does. So, yeah, we are in a real uncertain period, definitely more than we were before the new government came in. So they need to let us know what our funding is going to be going forward. So it's been moved by Lee, seconded by James. All in agreement? Thank you. Okay, on to item 5, the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Children's Partnership Annual Report 2023-2024 on pages 63 to 110. So this report presents the annual report for the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Children's Partnership. This is the report of the identified safeguarding partners who must publish an annual report on the effectiveness of multi-agency arrangements for safeguarding children. The Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Commission considered this report on the meeting on the 3rd of September and gave its full support. Jane Moore, Director of Children and Families, will present the report.
Thank you. So the report is bringing you the annual report for 23-24 of the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Children's Partnership. The County Council is one of the statutory safeguarding partners which have a shared and equal statutory duty with alongside the Integrated Care Board and Leicestershire Police, and that duty is to agree and make arrangements to work together to safeguard and promote the welfare of all children in Leicestershire. The multi-agency safeguarding arrangements are managed through a partnership, the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Children's Partnership. So as set out, the annual report was considered by the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 3rd of September. And the purpose of the annual report is to assess the impact of the work that's undertaken by the partnership on the safeguarding outcomes for children in Leicestershire and Rutland, and specifically it evaluates the performance against the priorities that were set out in the business plan for 23-25. A pre-publication draft of the annual report is appended to this report, and the report outlines the learning, assurance, training and improvement activity of the partnership and its partners and the impact this has had on safeguarding children. Some key points from the report are that there has been a sustained and demonstrable progress around the safeguarding of babies, business priority. The partnership has continued work around child mental health and emotional well-being, and work is continued in relation to keeping adolescents safe and supporting safe adolescents. We've continued to prioritise work around safeguarding children from diverse backgrounds and by promoting the locally agreed definition of cultural competency and standards of expected practice. And we've also been working hard on effective safeguarding in independent and school and out of school settings. So the annual report does include a summary of consultation and engagement work that the Safeguarding Partnership has carried out with children, young people and their families, and all members of the partnership have had opportunities to contribute to and comment on drafts of the annual report. So I move to the recommendations as set out in the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and I will move the motion as being part of this safeguarding board as well. So I see all the work that goes on, but it's a really good report to read through with lots of interesting stuff in there about what we're doing. But I think what comes out more is that our continued learning and training that we do with all our partners as well. So if there's anything that we've done reviews and that training's taken forward, so we are learning from things that we've done in the past. I think that's really good. So happy to move the motion. Pam?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy to second that motion. I have read the report, and I think it's one of those reports when it's not your area that you actually work in. It's very interesting to look at, and you really begin to appreciate the amount of work that officers do to make sure that this happens. And I think it's really good news that we're looking at mental health. We're checking independent schools that before we perhaps didn't. And I just want to commend everybody on the report and the good work that you all do. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. So moved by myself, seconded by Pam. All agreed? Thank you, Jane. Our next report is the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board Annual Report 2023-2024 on pages 111 to 150. So this presents the draft annual report for the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board. This is a report of the independent chair who must publish an annual report on the effectiveness of safeguarding adults in the local area. The Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny considered this report at its meeting on the 2nd of September and gave its full support. John Wilson, Director of Adults and Communities, will present the report. Siona Douglas, Independent Chair of the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board, has joined the meeting via Teams. I can see her online. And then I'll ask Christine to speak as lead member. Oh, okay, John Wilson's not here. Okay. Oh, he's here. Oh, Siona, you're presenting for us. Okay.
That's fine. Yes, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for inviting me. And thank you also for accommodating me online, because I've got the Safeguarding Adults Board afterwards. So I really appreciate you being able to do this. But yes, I'm Siona Douglas. I'm the independent chair of the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board, because it's a joint board. But for this purpose, I'm presenting the Leicestershire County report to you. So thanks very much for the invite. Just to clarify for you, yes, I attended scrutiny last week, and I think you've also in your pack got the paper which was attached to the report called the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board Joint Business Plan. And if you have got that, I just want to note with you, because I hadn't realised that was attached to papers, is that the dates on that report are not updated, and we will need to update those before, obviously, if that's published. So it's just to flag with you that we had that discussion at scrutiny, and I agreed that we would ensure that that was updated, so people could see where we were on our business plan, which is over the next 2 years. So just to very briefly really introduce the report, we're obviously governed by the children, the Care Act. Sorry, you just had the children's one, and we're part of 3 partners of the 3 council areas, and we have to produce an annual report every year, a strategic plan, and we obviously carry out safeguarding adults reviews. That's the statutory requirements. So this report is the report of the last year's work, and what we decided at the beginning of the year was that rather than have priorities set for each year, we would have priorities over a 2-year period. So the priorities for the 2-year period, which take us through this year and to March next year, are self-neglect, mental capacity and domestic abuse. And the reasons around that is we're confronting many more complex situations with adults around self-neglect, and we certainly realise that as partners, the partners who are working together, that we've still got some way to go around linking up, identifying self-neglect and providing information for the public to help them be able to know when to refer people to us. The other area is the Mental Capacity Act. As we have an increasing number of people who don't have capacity, we realise that there's a lot of work we need to do across the partnership in terms of equipping staff in hospitals, in local authority, in voluntary organisations around recognising capacity, because it is one of those really sensitive areas around when you're an adult. You know, is it a choice that you're making, or is it that you don't have capacity? So we're certainly undertaking a lot of work on that. And one of the major pieces of work that we've done is alongside Durham University, which has been really exciting, which is really about looking at domestic abuse against older adults, and particularly those that are very older, over 60s, looking at, you know, what is happening around those scenarios, because what's been discovered is that quite often when abuse is occurring in families of older people, that quite often it gets camouflaged by other issues. So this research, which all of the partners have participated in looking at particular situations where we've had safeguarding, is helping us focus focus on the need to have a much broader perspective around domestic abuse. And sometimes what's been happening is domestic abuse is being recorded in different contexts, and domestic abuse not recognised around safeguarding. So we've certainly undertaken a considerable amount of work, and we've just had the report, and we're just in the process of developing an action plan over this next year in order to put into place the findings of that report, which we've just received. And the other areas that we've been looking at is obviously around assurance, and my role is around assurance. Are we assured that people who are adults are receiving the safeguarding service that they should be receiving if they're vulnerable and require support? And one of the issues around that is I obviously work with a partnership who deliver a number of issues around audits of work that's taken place, of looking at the statistical data in order to see if there are triggers and points that we need to investigate further. And that's underpinned by a number of subgroups which deliver the work and report back to the board. So I guess it's probably appropriate for me not to say any more than that, because I know you'll have read the report, and to take any questions or comments that you may have. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and it's particularly good to see your focus on domestic abuse and self-neglect, because obviously that has a knock-on effect for children and families that are in my department. So that they're highly connected, aren't they, to ensuring that children are safeguarded as well. So that's good to hear. Christine.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm happy to move the motion about the annual report and thank the independent chair for all the work which has gone into this report. Members will have noted what she's just said, that the report's highlighting the progress made by prioritising self-neglect, mental health and domestic abuse. And on the 2nd of September, we were shown a film about highlighting issues with adults and abuse. And I must admit, it opened our eyes that some of the things we hadn't thought that were going to be abuse. And I do know that we're looking at doing a full briefing to the councillors about this, but at the moment we're looking at the CQC that are going to be coming in any day now, we've been told. So I'm afraid our priorities have changed. But thank you very much. And like Deborah said, we work very closely with the children and adults, because what happens in families can affect children. And you're probably aware with your double hat on with children and things like that. So thank you very much for the report.
Thank you. Pam?
Yeah, I'm very happy to second this report. Again, I've read the report, so I've done a lot of reading in this last week, I can assure you. But again, another very interesting report, because it's not an area that I'm involved with my portfolio. And I do think from elderly people that I know and that I get involved with locally, that we are doing our best to look after them properly. And I think the mental capacity one is a very good one that you're keeping an eye on, and I'm very pleased about that. And that domestic abuse is something that affects the whole family, and it's important that that's kept under control. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. There's no other speakers. Moved by Christine, seconded by Pam. All those in favour? Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.
Bye. Okay, item 7, the Corporate Complaints and Compliments Annual Report 2023 to 2024, pages 151 to 178. So this next report presents the Corporate Complaints and Compliments Annual Report, covering from the 1st of April 23 to the 31st of March 24. The report highlights a further increase in complaints and sets out the key reasons driving this. It also sets out a number of positive improvements made during the year. Chelsea O'Neill, Corporate Complaints and Information Services Manager, will present this report, and then I'll ask Lee as he speak as the lead member. So Chelsea has joined the council recently, and this is her first cabinet meeting. So welcome to you, Chelsea, and over to you to present the report.
Thank you. So just a summary of the complaints activity for the year 23-24. It has been a challenging year with 42% increase in complaints that was seen throughout the year. The report highlights 2 specific areas which saw substantial increases, the first being SEN, with recurring themes including timeliness of carrying out the annual reviews and issuing educational and healthcare plans. The second one being transport, with the main cause of complaints here being delays in arranging transport for ahead of the autumn term, and other themes being quality and consistency of transport arrangements and issuing personal transport budgets. So significant work is happening in both of these areas. However, SEN assessments remain an area with significant pressures. The level of cases to the LGO remains stable. Whilst there was a reduction in the financial remedy that's been awarded, there was an increase in the findings of maladministration. The biggest factor in these findings of maladministration continues to be SEN complaints. So despite the increase in the volumes, response timescales improved, with 90% of the complaints being responded to within the policy timescales, which is a real positive. And then the report touches on 2 statutory processes, which is adults and children's social care. Whilst complaints within children's social care do remain stable, there was an increase in adult social care, predominantly complaints being received around charging or care planning. Positively, there was no public reports issued throughout the year. And then finally, just for balance, it's worth noting there was an increase in compliments that was received throughout the year across all services, which positively reflects the good work that's being completed across different services. Thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea. I think quite a balanced report dealing with all the people that we do with all our residents during the year and how many services we offer. It's quite a balanced report. Lee?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's probably Lucy's first official Cabinet meeting as well as our Assistant Director, so welcome to yourself as well. And I thank Chelsea for the report. We like compliments. Obviously, we always get complaints, they get highlighted, but we also make a good note of our compliments as well, so it's always good to see them. Thanks again to the officers for their hard work and diligence on this, and also thanks to Scrutiny for their positive comments, which are included in the report. I think the only comment I'd make with the money hat on, I think if we were fairly funded, 3 of the top 5 categories that are highlighted in the report, about 40% wouldn't probably become complaints. So I think that would help us a long way in the work that we do. As I say, I'm happy that the honest comments made by Scrutiny are included in the report, and I'm more than happy to propose the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll second the motion. Any speakers? James?
Thank you, Chair. It looks like it was touched upon at the Scrutiny meeting, but about compliments. What are recorded here? Are these centrally recorded compliments, or are these individuals sort of receiving a nice email from someone and then send it to somewhere centrally? Because I'm aware that obviously complaints procedure have a formal sort of process that is generally well known, or generally people will be aware of. But I'm guessing a lot of the time with the compliments, it will just be an officer's email me, so I'll go back and thank you very much, you went above and beyond there, or you really helped me out, or something like that. So the reason I asked the question is really because this could be sort of an underreport of the number of compliments we actually get, and to accurately reflect the good work that goes on.
Thank you. I think it is probably an accurate statement that it is an underreport. Sometimes people are more, I suppose, proactive in raising a complaint than are in giving positive feedback. And so the compliments will come into the team from either service or public, and then we will record them. And myself and the team do encourage all the different services to make sure that when they are getting that good feedback, it is recorded. But essentially, we can only record what does come through.
Yeah, I think you're true there. We're as human beings more likely to complain than we are to compliment, aren't we? So I think definitely is slightly, there's probably a lot more compliments that people see as just being part of their job that they don't actually record as a compliment. So, but I think overall it was a very balanced report. So Louise, sorry.
It's okay. I was just going to say, the areas we're getting complaints in, we know there are issues within those areas. But when you think of the amount of work that's done right across the council, I think the officers deserve credit for all the work that's being done where we are getting it right. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No. So moved by Lee, seconded by me. All agreed? Thank you both. Okay, on to item 8, Customer Experience Strategy 2024-2028, proposed consultation on pages 179 to 200. So this report seeks approval for the consultation on the Council's draft new customer experience strategy. So the report provides an outline of the draft strategy and sets out the approach to the proposed consultation. I got down that Declan was going to present this report. I'm not sure if is he still there? So Declan Keegan will present this report, and then I'll ask Lee to speak as lead member.
Chair. This report covers the customer experience strategy that's proposed to be consulted on until the 10th of November, with the outcome reported to Cabinet at the meeting in December. This will be the Council's first customer experience strategy and has been developed through the work within the customer programme, which is part of the Council's strategic change portfolio. The overarching aim of the strategy is to allow people to be able to communicate with our services quicker and easier through modern and accessible ways. The programme has undertaken some trial projects to determine how our services can improve, how they deliver an efficient and effective customer service. The learnings from these projects have shown the potential benefit of increasing the consistency in our approach across the wider council. There is an opportunity to make customer services better for people through a combination of improved communications with customers, streamlining the steps required when customers interact with services, and where appropriate, enhancing our digital offering to customers. Accessibility remains an important theme throughout the strategy. Before changes are made to customer service channel, it is vital that we understand who's making the contact and what they can do. The strategy recognises that there will continue to be a proportion of customers that are unable to access services online, and those customers will continue to be supported through more traditional channels such as telephone. The strategy spans the whole organisation on the premise that customer service is everyone's responsibility and therefore does not just sit with the customer service centre. The strategy has been drafted looking at best practice as well as being informed by pilots and recent engagement with users of the Council Service Centre to understand their current experience. Where our customer service isn't at the right standard, the consequence is usually additional and more lengthy contacts with the Council. Hence, by improving customer service, there is a potential to avoid incurring costs, which should make the strategy self-financing over the medium term. As part of the consultation, views from customers, staff and elected members on the draft strategy, its vision and the principles will be sought. The Scrutiny Committee will have the chance to respond to the draft strategy at its meeting on the 6th of November. It will also receive a status update on feedback received during the consultation so far. The recommendation to approve the strategy for consultation is per the order paper.
Thank you. Lee?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Declan. Welcome the strategy and the engagement that's planned. I think I'm pleased with the focus on understanding who is using our services before changes are made. I think we do a good job. We evolve as a sort of county with what we offer, but I would just see opportunities for residents who are technology savvy to receive a quicker, more flexible service than traditional contact methods. This is the evolvement. So I do ask Leicestershire residents, groups and users to get involved and tell us your views, whether they're positive or whether they're negative, so we can use these to improve our customer service experience. Thank you.
Robert?
Yeah, happy to second the motion, and just to reiterate what Lee has said, I think it is important to get the balance right between having that added flexibility for people who want to use the technology, but also giving the support to those of us who maybe struggle with it and keeping that personal service. So I think it's a good strategy going forward.
Yeah, just reiterate that we'd encourage many of our partners and residents to respond. I think I much prefer to do things online. I was on wait for 30 minutes to HMR Revenues to try and pay a tax bill yesterday, and I would have much rather have done that online than sat on the phone for half an hour. So there are people there that want to use that technology, and I think we should ensure that we're covering all bases. And I think there's nothing more frustrating for us as people and our customers when they don't get a response they're expecting. So I'm really pleased to see these covers across the whole council and not just sort of the call centre and contact centre. So yeah, we encourage everyone to respond. Any other speakers? James?
Thank you. As obviously read the report, but I don't think we currently have it, but have we considered online chat as a way forward? I mean, I'm with everyone that's spoken so far in terms of, I think that we live in a sort of 24-hour society now. I much prefer to do things via app on the internet and so forth. But there are times when I'm not say I was middle of the road in terms of tech. I'm not the expert in it, but I can use it. And I was having to do a form just this week, actually. I was applying for my youngest son's school place for next year. And there was a couple of points in it where I was just a bit unsure as to what I'm applying for. And I certainly didn't want to mess that up, lest I never hear the end of it from my wife. So I gave the call centre a call and couldn't get through because the line was closed when I called. It was about 4 o'clock. So what would have been really useful is just to go online, do the chat. But as I said, I don't think that was an option, but it's potentially a halfway house between having phone lines manned, which obviously has a cost to it, versus an operator that could maybe have multiple conversations going at any one time.
In terms of the chats, it's something they can look at. I know they've looked at, been watching other councils. They've done some of the automated sort of chat facilities, kind of, I suppose, one step further. And that's had, I suppose, mixed results so far, as it's a bit of an emerging kind of refining piece. But it's something we can sort of take back and look at, because it is one thing from the sort of the initial kind of feedback we did find that if people found doing the online sort of services easy, they're more prepared to try them out, which hopefully ends up as a bit of a win-win. So it's something we can take back.
Something worse than a bot answering you in a totally different way that you want the answer. So that's even more frustrating when you don't get the answer from a bot. So yeah, I think we are looking at all avenues, aren't we? And AI is definitely something that's up and coming, but we'll learn from everyone else's mistakes. So thank you for that. So moved by Lee, seconded by Robert. All in favour? Thank you. Okay, our next one, item 9, is our Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Strategy 2024-28. So this report will present the outcome of consultation on the Council's Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Strategy and seeks our approval for submission of the final strategy to full Council. So we've got Zafar, the Assistant Chief Constable, Leon, the Policy Manager, will present this report, and then I'll ask Pam to speak as lead member, and just to congratulate Zafar on your appointment as Assistant Chief Executive. So over to you.
Thank you for the introduction and the kind remarks. This report presents the outcome of the consultation on the Equality and Diversity and Inclusion Strategy 2024 to 2028 and seeks approval for submission of the final strategy to full Council on the 25th of September. The strategy has been revised and developed, taking into account residents' views, staff views, the views of community groups, and also has been presented to the Council's Overview and Scrutiny Commission, and it reflects all that feedback. It also takes into account a decision of the Council in February 2024 when we added care leavers, or those with a care experience, as a protected characteristic. It's founded on 7 principles or pillars, as we've referred to them in the document. Those are leadership, workforce, evidence, community engagement, commercial influence, service delivery, accreditation, and external recognition. The consultation is based around those issues, and Leon's going to briefly just go through some of the details specifically around the consultation.
The consultation consisted of 4 activity streams: an Have Your Say survey, which was available online and in paper form, a series of face-to-face meetings with community organisations, staff networks, trade unions, and a series of virtual meetings and a discussion at the Council Scrutiny Commission. Overall, 72% of respondents to the survey agreed with the draft strategy, and 13% disagreed. Those that disagreed tended to form 2 camps: those that wanted the strategy to actually be stronger and clearer, and those that argued that EDI should not be a priority. Of the 7 pillars, there was greater support for community engagement, accessible and fair services, and a diverse workforce and culture. Issues such as external accreditation or using commercial influence with other bodies were viewed as less important. There were a number of quotes within the body of the report which reflect the nature of the comments received. A number of meetings with community groups and staff networks allowed a more nuanced and in-depth discussion of the issues. They were particularly effective in raising awareness and understanding of the issues faced by service users and staff. Pertinent topics were community and staff safety, given greater prominence during the recent summer riots, using performance data effectively, and ensuring that digital approach to access to services and employment did not exclude people. The meeting of the Scrutiny Commission raised similar themes, a sense the draft strategy was too text-heavy and needed to be more engaging, discussion around the collection and use of data to drive the strategy, the pros and cons of digitalisation, and putting greater emphasis on the role of members. We've therefore revised the strategy to seek to reflect the range of comments received, whilst keeping the broad framework of the 7 pillars. We've also included within the strategy an action plan which will now drive the implementation of the strategy. This will be coordinated by the Officer-led Corporate Equalities Board with annual update reports to Cabinet. Thank you, and the recommendations are set out in the order paper.
Thank you. Pam?
Thank you for that. I would like to thank the officers who have been involved in developing this strategy and undertaking the consultation and preparing the reports. I know how hard the staff have worked and the time and energy they've put into this consultation. The Council has a steadfast commitment to equality, diversity and inclusion, not only to meet the statutory requirements of the Equality Act, but also to ensure we deliver high quality services to all our residents and recruit and retain a diverse and representative workforce. We also commit to listen to the diverse communities of Leicestershire and do what we can to promote community cohesion and the belief that Leicestershire is a great place to live, study and work for all. I commend this report and formally propose the recommendations.
Thanks, Pam. Louise?
Thank you. Really good to see lived care experience included now. I think we are proud of the work we do in this area, but we're not complacent, obviously. And I echo, there is a vast amount of work done within the department. Having had the portfolio before, I echo what you've said, Pam, and I know you're very proud of what the staff have achieved. So I'm quite happy to second the report.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No, it's a really good report. Strategy is really good to read through as well. So thank you everyone for all the hard work. And I know we do a lot of hard work here at Leicestershire to make sure that we are inclusive, and equality and diversity is really, really important to us all. So thank you for that. All in favour? Thank you very much. On to item 10, our improving passenger transport through a refreshed bus service improvement plan on pages 261 to 34A. So this report provides us with an update on work associated with the refresh of the Leicestershire bus service improvement plan and seeks approval of the plan, which is attached as Annex A of the report. The Highways and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Commission considered the report on its meeting on the 5th of September, and a draft minute has been attached to the order paper of March 10. Jenna Walker, Assistant Director of Environmental Transport, will present the report. Over to you, Jenna.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you said, so this report presents the Refresh Bus Service Improvement Plan, which we call BSIP for short in the department, attached as the appendix. This is a refresh of an existing plan that we put together working with bus operators in the area. You'll notice that there isn't a great deal of change from the report version, but that has been discussed and refreshed with our partners who believe that the objectives and plan we set out over the longer term are still appropriate. So we've updated the BSIP in line with the national guidance and the requirement from government. The 5 main objectives that were set out in the report still remain the focus of both ourselves and our commercial partners. That's working towards a single system of integrated transport, reliable, quicker journey times, making transport affordable, particularly for younger people, that it's easy to use and a positive customer experience, and a more attractive, greener option moving forward. The report itself does set out some challenges around delivering passenger transport in the current sort of financial and policy climate. We've had a lot of short-term set of funding policy around passenger transport, particularly bus services following the COVID pandemic. And they are set out in paragraph 42. But there are also some successes that working together and with under the bus service improvement plan that have happened so far. They include the development of the enhanced partnership, Aurora Mobility Fund bid, leading to a trial of digital responsive transport, a successful bid for zero emissions buses in the area under what's called the Zebra Fund, and that was £8.8 million of investment into new electric vehicles in Leicestershire. So there has been positives, and the group of operators and ourselves here are keen to progress that. So ambitions and proposals are set out for 2025 to 2035. I need to emphasise they are long-term ambitions, and the scale of which they're delivered is dependent on the availability of funding going forward in the future. You'll see in there, there's up to £100 million of things we could do for passenger transport in Leicestershire over that period. And as I say, we'll adopt a sort of proportionate approach relative to the funding that's available to us. But I think it's important to have the plan set out that ambition to allow us to bid into and receive government funding. Without the plan, there's no basis for the receipt of that funding. So again, that plan sets out, subject to the funding, and a range of options that we could deliver, including expansion of digital demand responsive transport, further investment in branding and network, sort of the people recognising the bus network as a complete offer, offers to discount travel for younger people and have a more consistent approach to younger persons travel across the county. Enhancement of other sustainable travels opportunities, so we have an integrated transport system, and improvements things like bus stop provision and infrastructure, fare ticketing, and ticketing offers as well. So the recommendations are as per the report, and we would like really to adopt this plan to enable us to set out our ambitions to government and to work with operators going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jenna. And I'll move the motion on the order paper. I did just mark a couple of bits here about what you've just said about funding going forward. And there's a couple of things here that we're really uncertain going forward. And we've already mentioned earlier in the meeting that if we don't get confirmation of funding, we're not going to be able to deliver what we need to deliver. So it all just rests on funding. So let's hope that is forthcoming. But I'll move the motion. Lee?
Yeah, happy to second, Chair. No further comments.
Christine?
Yeah, I'm sure you won't be surprised at me speaking up about buses being removed in Shepshed with all the development that we're getting. And what we're finding, though, even though the county gave us 50,000 towards the second community bus, we're restricted of what we can use it for, because it's going to be up against the buses owned by the private companies. But they're taking the routes off. Half of Shepshed now doesn't get a bus. And, we are an aged population as well there. So it's really frustrating. They turn around and say, well, you can't use your community bus because it's, we're private, a company. But then they're taking the buses away. So, what have our residents got to do? So I welcome this, but I do think we've got to be a little bit more stricter with the commercial buses about when they remove them. And when the planning application comes in and says, you've got a good bus route, and then 2 years down the line, they removed the bus route that they got the planning for. So it's really, really frustrating for myself and for residents. And I will keep going on about that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. No, I appreciate it. We've had discussions over the years, haven't we, about it, and appreciate that frustration. I think one thing I'll just offer in reassurance around that development point is in previous years, you'll be aware that when development comes forward, the agreement about how it will be managed tends to sort of predate its actual delivery by a number of years. So we're always catching up. But one of those lessons learned we had was that if a bus route existed, we wouldn't insist on conditioning anything else. Now what we do is condition the continuation of that bus service for a number of years. So if it runs commercially, that's fine. But if that bus route was to come off, an alternative would have to go on. We can't do that forever. We can only do that for a number, usually around 5 years from the start of a development. But we have introduced that as an improvement to deal with some of those issues going forward.
Can I come back on that? Yeah, but we've now got 2 community buses in Shepshed. and one would really like to do like they do in Turkey, like the Dole bus that goes round. But we are restricted whenever we try to ask about what we can do. You can't, because you're going to be in conflict against the commercial. So we're fighting a brick wall, really. And I know you're doing it, and I know you probably get fed up with hearing from me, but I'm there for the people of Shropshire that's who have elected me in.
If it's okay, Chair, I can come quickly back on that. I do understand what you're saying. I think the difficulty about that regulation is that's set out in the Transport Act, and there isn't a great deal that we can do around the regulations and competition information around that. But happy to pick up with you outside on that specific issue. James?
Chair, just to really, I guess, expand a little bit on what Christine's just said. I think that I do think the priority in terms of it, first of all, very much welcome any additional funding in this area, but I think a priority as us as the county council should be providing some service to the residents that need it. Now, I've had a lot of experience on this in the last couple of years in my own villages. I won't talk about those specifically, although I know you're aware of them. But the difference between sort of this as buses as a commercial service versus any other commercial services, a shop or whatever it might be, is that when the market can't support a commercial service in a given village, it leaves people stranded if there's no alternatives. If a shop shuts, that's unfortunate. I'll go to a different shop. If a bus ends and I don't drive, then that's me stranded. And the amount of sort of times where people saying can't get to doctors, I can't get to work, can't get to school and so forth, and it really is a lifeline. So that's sort of my appeal really, is that first and foremost we should be looking at providing a service of some sort to everyone before we then start looking at additional things that are nice to have but actually are not lifeline essentials for people.
I'll come back to Jenna on that.
I think I would just agree in the sense that our own passenger transport policy, aside from the government's, focuses on the provision of that. So to whatever extent we have budget, the prioritisation will be on those things. And actually at scrutiny, we had a good discussion about the different models in which you might be able to provide that, rather than a traditional local bus being more appropriate everywhere. So things like having a local bus on your main corridor routes, but using digital demand responsive transport to provide that more flexible service. And we discussed at scrutiny that the trial we're running with the Fox Connect in part of the county is providing more flexible service, people perhaps being able to use it to attend social groups that they wouldn't be able to before, and us being able to reach a wider area of the county with the same resource it might have taken us to. So I think we will need to be flexible going forward about how we do that, and be prepared to trial things and see how they go in order to meet that. But I think our policy currently aligns with that priority, and we will prioritise investment that we do get in line with that approach as well.
I think just picking up on that as well, people need to use the services because they're really, really expected to put them on. If people aren't using them, then they're just going to die, aren't they? Because we can't continue the funding for if people don't use them. So thank you for all those comments. So I move the motion on the order paper. Lee second. Are we all happy to approve? Thanks, Jana. Okay, on to item 11, electric vehicle charging strategy. Pages 341 to 454. So this report informs us the public engagement that's informing the development of the council's new electric vehicle charging strategy, and seeks approval of the strategy, which is attached as appendix to the report. So Jenna is still here to present that report. Over to you, Jenna.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you said, so this is the proposal of our electric vehicle charging strategy. There are other elements to electric vehicles that I think in the future we'll be developing our policy and our approaches to more formally. But this report specifically sort of focuses on highway vehicle charging, particularly where there's quite a large proportion of Leicestershire homes that wouldn't have the opportunity for off-street charging. So be aware that when we plan our highways and transport work, quite often we refer to forecasts, future forecasts, and the uptake of electric vehicles is forecast to rapidly increase over the next decade as we move towards that 2035 deadline for no new diesel or petrol cars. EV ownership in Leicestershire has already increased by 61% since 2021-22. But most of that demand for charging is currently met through people who are able to charge on sort of private driveway arrangements. And it's been recognised that a move to electric vehicles and greener technology, that availability of on-street parking is a barrier to that expansion. And so we've been working with the Levi project to run a trial to look at where we might be able to introduce on-street vehicle charging infrastructure to see how we can support a greater take-up of electric vehicles in the future. So the charging strategy itself that we presented is not a legal requirement, but it is an expectation from government that highway authorities such as ourselves to have a strategy in place by the end of 24-25. And again, similar to what I was saying about the bus services improvement plan, it's a way of setting out our ambition and a conversation with government to hopefully seek further funding to deliver positive improvements around electric vehicle. So it's a key element as well of our local transport plan 4 that's in development at the moment. The report sets out the sort of goals and objectives that the electric vehicle charging strategy has. And I think we've previously talked through those with scrutiny as well. They're set out in the report. I won't read them in detail. And I think just to sort of highlight that our focus in delivering the charging infrastructure is in the public highway. So there are other public spaces that in the future may be suitable for electric vehicle charging, but we're sort of talking about you kind of on street charging, and particularly looking at residential areas where there's not availability for off-road parking. And I think one of the things we're looking at with the strategy and also with the pilot is how you balance that sort of demand and how commercially viable those opportunities are. So again, it's very similar to buses. There'll be areas where that the infrastructure will almost pay for itself with the demand. There'll be areas where it's more difficult to introduce and will effectively run at a deficit, and it's finding that balance across the whole strategy. So the pilot work that we've been doing is working with Midlands Connect. We're working with a consortium of other local authorities to kind of get maximum efficiency out of the money and learn as many lessons as we can. We've secured around £1 million for that initial pilot, and there is the possibility of an additional sort of 3.1 million to deliver a larger scale project following confirmation of funding and the successful delivery of the pilot. So just to highlight some of the consultation work that went on to inform the strategy and perhaps where the charging locations are going. There was a 7-week engagement exercise we did at the end of 2023. That was with members of the public, yourselves, district councillors and parish councils as well. It was really looking at trying to find out a bit more about how people use their electric vehicles, what their habits are for charging, what the barriers are to take up what might be, and then also where appropriate places for charging points might go. So they're obviously about practical accessibility for residents, but there's also a number of technical elements that might influence whether you can put charging points in around utilities in the highways and footways, whether it's safe, whether the ground is appropriate for it, those type of things. So there's a lot of work to be done building on those, but we took those suggestions in and they've informed the strategy going forward. So there are further challenges, I think, to come in addressing electric vehicles, things like around trailing cables and safety, where, you know, like I say about the kind of sustainability of the financial aspects of the provision, and also how long the government funding will continue. But yeah, seeking the approval of Cabinet today to adopt the strategy and deliver the pilot in line with its aims and objectives.
Thanks, Janet. I'll move the motion on the order paper. Just a couple of points to me. Are we restricted by the national grid connections? So tapping into all that sort of stuff. Is there an issue with the national grid?
I don't think I'd go. I'm probably not qualified to say if there's an issue with the national grid, but there certainly is a consideration in terms of the available capacity in the grid, and we've tried to take that into account where we're doing the pilot. I suspect if we were to roll out on a major scale, that would become more of a factor and negotiations were. And I think, again, particularly, I've already mentioned we're working with 4 other highway authorities. that demand is multiplying, and we are aware of local areas where perhaps electric vehicle schemes, either bikes or vehicles, have had problems in delivery because of the availability of the energy. So it's definitely a factor going forward for us to work on, but I think that's the important aspect of having a pilot, so that we can understand those and work better in the future.
Just a couple of other points about the safety of provision. So if you're going to do an area, you've mentioned sort of libraries here or space that the council owns, is the safety of that, because a lot of people say to me, well, I wouldn't leave my car there overnight because of ASB. So we need to just be wary of, if we are producing those, that they are likely to attract ASB as well. And just on the lamppost ones, we're obviously talking about terrace streets. If it becomes huge demands, are we going to end up with neighbourhood disputes of people pulling because everyone's going to be wanting to charge. If there's not enough chargers to go around, it's exactly the same as if there's not enough parking spaces in a terrace street. We end up with these neighbourhood disputes. So are we going to be really careful about how we go about this to prevent anything like that happening?
I think the short answer to that is yes. We'll all be familiar here in Highways and Transport just with the number of parking complaints we get. So yeah, it's definitely something that we are looking at. And I think will be the sort of, I guess I would call it etiquette around how sort of shared parking would work is something that we are looking at through the trial. I think, if I'm honest, I imagine there will be some problems with it in the short term, but hopefully that having that opportunity will allow us to sort of iron those out, really.
I see my case load is going up with EV charging disputes about neighbours. Blake.
Thanks, Deborah, and thanks, Janet, for the presentation. I was grateful to receive, as lead member for the Environment Department, a briefing on the strategy after it had been through Aussie, and I'll feed into the Cabinet some of the comments I made at that briefing. And in general, I welcome the strategy. I know it's taken some time to get here, but it's never easy working in collaboration with other partners. The other thing I've noted is, much like the bus strategy, we somewhat snookered by central government legislation often. And this is another case where I believe that, we're asked to execute a task locally, but the restraints and the harnesses are being put on us because of legislation and other governmental bureaucracy. And in some respects, the chair, Deborah, just mentioned about the national grid and the capacity issues, but I don't think it's any secret that whilst electric car ownership is going up, it certainly isn't the agreed upon future mechanism of transport. And I think, technology is moving at such a pace that there'll be a variety of different systems that will power our motor vehicles and our transport more generally. And we need to be mindful about that before we sink many millions of public expenditure into these schemes. But what really concerns me here is we all know that the district and borough councils in Leicestershire, some years ago, they in some cases own their own car parks, and they've put electric charging points, often with grants or assistance from the county council, in those car parks. And I park on a daily basis in a particular car park in Market Harborough, where there must be 7 or 8 electric charging points, and they're seldom used. On a daily basis, you very rarely see anyone use them. And the one person that does seem to use one of the points probably once a week, I actually approached him a couple of months ago to ask him why he uses it. And he quite rightly pointed out some of the constraints with the public charging system. So what happens is the district councils have procured services from some private entities, and they all have their own different app. And it's very complicated and confusing to download the app, particularly if the Wi-Fi isn't prevalent in that particular area. And every single charging point you go to around the country seems to have its own different app and system to be able to access that charging point. The second point is the commercial VAT on electricity. If you charge your car in a commercial car park, and I know we authorities have put electric charging infrastructure in, but for the better and for the greater good. But the reality is the commerciality means that you'll be paying 20% VAT on that electricity, where if you charge at home, it's 5%. It's a domestic rate. And that, when you factor in the premium and the margins that the commercial operators will put in the cost of supplying that charging point, just makes it economically unviable for people to charge in these locations. So I'm supportive generally of the strategy, but before we go to the main rollout, which could be many hundreds of charging points, I do really think we need to make sure that we've tried and tested and got all the feedback and made sure we've got the formula right, because I wouldn't want to see in 5-10 years time millions and millions of pounds of public taxpayers' money being sunk into these schemes, and we find down the line there's no use for them. But for this strategy and this pilot, I'm very supportive. So I'll second the motion.
Is there any points you want to pick up there, Jenna?
Just very quickly, Chair, I think just that we are, I'm going to say, focused on the environment and the electric vehicle charging strategy here. We are aware of the alternatives that can be in, and the example my staff give me is it's like going around installing VHS, in every place instead of and then DVDs and then streaming coming along. So we are conscious of that. I think hydrogen particularly is something for larger vehicles and stuff that we're keeping in touch with. I agree. I would think that the pilot and then delivery approach is right. You will notice though that in the report the funding timelines do overlap, and the government grant comes with an imperative really of spending the money quickly. So we do need to make sure that we can try and learn as many of those lessons as possible. Currently, all of the funding we're putting into it at Leicestershire has come from that grant from government through Midlands Connect centrally. I think before we would start investing our own capital programme in that, we would absolutely, as you say, go through all of those checks and lessons learned as well. Christine?
Thank you, Deborah. I welcome the proposal, even though I'm of the opinion that electric vehicles are not as environmentally friendly as they're made out to be. But that's my opinion, and I'm probably in the minority. And thank you, Blake, for some of that information about the electricity and that, but it'll never apply to me because I shall never have an electric vehicle. My one concern is that even though these proposals meet the government guidelines, I am aware that disabled people who use wheelchairs have difficulties in using them, as they are not able to get right up to them to reach the controllers. And the officers know that I've got in touch and they've written back to me, and I asked that Leicestershire County Council look at making some of the chargers wheel friendly and promote them. And like Blake said, you're sometimes restricted to what the government guidelines are, but they're not meeting everybody's requirements, and if somebody in a wheelchair can't get near enough, get to the controllers to then charge their vehicle up, they might be all right locally, but nationally, I'm hearing that, they really are very concerned about going too far because they just can't charge their vehicles. So I'm just saying something that I'm not quite sure whether we can do anything about, but I would like us to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, we have had several questions around that and are working with the operators to try and do something about that as part of the work that we're doing. I haven't got any definite answers at the moment.
I think a lot of the different electric cars have different points where you plug in as well, which doesn't make it very universal either, which creates more problems. But I know the one that we had in the district car park in the village I live, to use normal spaces, there's not a lot of gap between the cars, so you can't actually get to between the cars to get there. But yeah, you can't. It's not enough room. Yeah.
When you get there, there's bollards round, so you can't then get any nearer because in a wheelchair you're sitting further back. So it must be very difficult. As I say, it won't apply to me because I won't have an electric car.
Or a wheelchair, Christine. Louise.
Thanks. Having got electric, I can quite agree with what Blake said about the apps and the VAT, and I think that's really important. A lot of the time people living in housing that hasn't got off-street parking will be those people that perhaps are struggling anyway with income. So I think that's really important. And I quite agree with Christine about disabled people being able to access. We also have a problem in that a lot of electric cars have a different place where they plug in, and you get a lot of people who are quite inconsiderate about, crossing over their bays. So for disabled people, that's even worse. So.
Thank you. Now the speakers, so moved by me, seconded by Blake. All in favour? Thank you, Jana. On to item 12, Proposed response to consultation on the National Planning Policy Framework, pages 455 to 502. So this report provides an overview of the government's proposed planning reforms with a particular focus on the proposed changes to the National Planning Policy Framework and seeks approval for the comments to be submitted as the County Council's response to the government's consultation. Julie Thomas, Head of Planning, Historic and Natural Environment, will present the report. Then I will ask Rob to speak as lead member. So over to you, Julie.
Thank you. As you can see, this is a joint report between the Chief Executive and the Director of Environment and Transport. Hence, we've got Jana with us today as well. This is the first of a number of consultation documents we're expecting from the government over the coming months with regard to proposed changes to the town and country planning system. While it relates to the NPPF, the actual questions which are associated with the consultation do go beyond the scope of the NPPF and do go into other areas. I think it just gives us a flavour of what the government is proposing. Sharon Wiggins, who's the team leader for strategic planning, is going to take us through the detail of the report today, and then Jana will chip in with the concerns regarding the highways aspects of it. Thank you.
Thank you. As Julie's mentioned, it is a very wide-ranging consultation on planning reforms from the new government, and it's one of many to come. It started at the end of July and it extends until the 24th of September. There are 106 questions posed in total, and what we sought to do is very much focus on what we feel we need to be saying from a county council perspective. So what we have in the report under paragraph 31A through to L are the actual main aspects of the consultation. And in there you'll see proposals for a new standard method for calculating housing at district level. And you'll see there's quite a few questions around Greenbelt. What we also have in there is reference to the move from predict and provide to a vision-led approach in transport, which Jana will kindly come on to in a bit more detail later. Surprisingly as well, government's taken the opportunity to spread out and look at some wider issues. So there's also views sought on nationally significant infrastructure projects and local plan intervention and planning fees as well. And they're covered in paragraph 31, items M through to O. Also, it's worth noting that the government does not propose continuing with the infrastructure levy, which was set out in the Levelling Up Regeneration Act of 2023. The written ministerial statement that came out earlier in the summer also noted more information will be announced in the future on national development management policies, new towns, mandatory strategic planning and the related spatial development strategies, and modernising planning committees, and an affordable housing revolution, and further revised aspects to the NPPF in the summer/autumn 2025. So this is the beginning of more to come. On the whole, it is proposed that the County Council welcomes and supports the changes put forward. However, there are challenges and uncertainties which you'll find set out in the report in paragraph 41. And just very briefly to recap on what those are, this relates to local plans once very neatly self-contained, but this is no longer the case. In the past, sites allocated in a local plan could generally deliver the transport interventions required without third-party actions or investment, but this is certainly no longer the case. Secondly, increasingly strategic scale transport interventions are required to enable local plan delivery, in particular to deliver with cumulative transport and cross administrative boundary impacts of site allocations. Thirdly, work to develop local plan transport evidence bases is becoming incredibly complex. So we can see, and we'll come on to mention this in the following report, that we're working cross-boundary on a more regular basis in order to forward work, which is going to be more robust. Fourthly, is becoming a necessity to work beyond administrative boundaries and spheres of responsibility to coordinate that delivery on those allocations. to ensure that it comes forward in a way where it is at the right time and it actually delivers those strategic transport interventions. Fifthly, it's worth saying that there is an ever-increasing reliance on local plans on the interventions in the strategic road network. That's working really closely, of course, with National Highways and others such as Network Rail. And sixthly, the point around uncertainties and challenges is around national policy is seemingly too removed from reality, and that is in relation to both spatial planning and also the cost and ease of delivery. So in terms of the actual proposed response of the County Council, this starts at paragraph 47 in the report and extends to paragraph 96, and it's set out in detail in Appendix A. So the overarching response will be very much that it is considered there are fundamental changes and further reforms required. Some of those are beyond the field of planning to enable the effective delivery of homes and jobs in sustainable locations at the quantum desired by government. The figure you may have heard is 1.5 million during the session of this current government. The County Council welcomes and supports the proposals around spatial development strategies, which will seek to formalise strategic planning, and warmly welcomes the intent to hold conversations in two-tier areas as to how this would best work. Strong need to consider and put in place arrangements to require and hold joint local plan examinations is one of the aspects we'd like to feed back to, where we can see that there's real strong strategic and cross-boundary considerations. We also would like to feed back to governments that there is well worth giving consideration to a new test of soundness, which deals with the longer term. The tests of soundness at the moment for local plan making do point a district council very much to dealing with the duration of the local plan period and not looking at that 15 to 30 year period beyond. At this point, I'd like to hand over to Jenna, to be honest, to talk more about the move from predict and provide to the vision-led approach in transport and what that entails.
Thank you. I think first thing to point out is the vision and validate approach. We need more detail around that really and understanding what the expectations are. But I think probably just sort of worth thinking about the difference now. What we look at, I'm not a transport modeller and my colleagues are probably cringing at my simplistic explanation, but broadly what we do is we look at how people behave now, and they usually take the shortest convenient sort of route, that affordability of the transport options available to them. And we look at the growth going in and we say when that additional growth goes in, that behaviour pattern is likely to lead to this level of demand for highways and transport capacity, this level of walking and cycling, public transport, and then we try and provide for that demand. Vision and validate, in principle, I think has got a lot of potential, because we know that we can't continue to have the levels of traffic we've got with the capacity on the network. We know that we need people to make more active choices in their travel for health reasons and other things. So the opportunity to have a vision about how people do that and how it supports a place, and then sort of work towards that, I think is a positive thing. But I don't think it necessarily solves the problems. You are still going to have to make interventions to influence that vision and bring it to life. And those interventions I can't see being any less costly or easier to deliver on a general principle than what we're doing now. So I think the principle potentially is welcome in the sense that it allows us to focus on making changes, on making positive policy interventions into a place. But I think the issues that Sharon pointed out that we've highlighted in terms of making that a reality, you know, the funding, the coordination, the strategy on the ground, will still exist. But I think ultimately we need a bit more information as well about what government are expecting that vision and validate model to how that's going to be used in reality as well. And I think those are the sort of comments underpinning our position. Thank you.
Robert.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. First of all, thanks to everyone, because I know a huge amount of work has gone into this over a very short period of time. As somebody who works in training as a professional trainer, I always beware mission statements that are always motherhood and apple pie. It's what actually sits underneath them that is the problem. And I think when you read through the report, you realise what sits underneath this and the huge changes that these are going to bring. So I think the work that's being done and keeping us informed is very important. From a strategic point of view, Deborah, myself and the Chief Executive have met with the Claire Ward, the Mayor of the East Midlands, who obviously a lot of the development in on our borders actually sort of crosses over, and certainly from the Freeport's point of view. So it's important to keep those relationships going, and we have a good relationship and we'll continue to meet, because what happens in, you know, it doesn't stop at a county boundary. So it's very important that we do that. I think also I will just underline the bit about the slightly removed from reality. If you take the walking and cycling network, if I look at Mercia Park in northwest Leicestershire, just on the edge of my own division, there was a great walking and cycling strategy put in for that, of which no one walks and cycles there. It's what is put through as a plan doesn't actually end up in reality. So I think it's really important that we look through the report in detail, because it will have a big effect onto us. I also note the issue that you've raised in there about the local flooding and dealing with that, because that's becoming an increasing problem, certainly in all our divisions on this. Obviously, we need far more detail on this, but one of the things I would make as a slight aside to this is to make sure that we don't end up with a democratic deficit on this. I find it slightly concerning when we're talking about, which we're not in this report, but generally talking about NIMBYs, who are actually concerned residents. And I think it's important that we actually encourage better communications with the local communities, not just from the local authorities, but with the developers, to make sure that we're actually selling some of the benefits of this, you know, the more jobs, more customers, and also more young families for our schools in those areas. So I think that's an important point. But on the whole, I'm very happy to propose what we're putting forward. I think what you've précised here is very clear and succinct, and actually hides a huge amount of work that's going to go in there. And as you say, there are a number of other consultations coming through. So I appreciate this is going to be a very busy time with you, especially when we look at the next item on the agenda on top of all that. So that's all I want to say at the moment.
Thanks, Robert. And I'll second the motion. I just wanted to check, because obviously there's a lot of consultation going forward and very little detail here at the moment, but are the new housing numbers coming into effect fairly soon that the government have put forward?
There are transitional arrangements which have been suggested, and they're anticipating that there'll be quite a bit of feedback on that. And those transitional arrangements do vary depending on where you are with your local plan at this moment in time, what stage you've got to, as to whether you continue under the current MPPF or whether you continue under the new one. So that's all to still sort of really come out in terms of the detail, and we'll be updating members once we've got more of a view from our district colleagues as well as to how it's looking across the 7 districts.
Are we going to end up possibly in a planning by appeal kind of scenario again if the housing numbers drop below what's expected, and that means that we then miss out on a lot of infrastructure and Section 106 to provide services?
The hope is that certainly it won't be, because there's that aspiration to have full local plan coverage as soon as they can get that in place. But I think the reality of it might be that we'll practically be in that situation.
I just wanted to add that we're already in a situation where 3 of our districts don't have a 5-year housing land supply. So we are still facing planning by appeal. At the moment, what the transitional arrangements are is that if you're at Reg 19, so you're ready to submit your plan for examination, at the time the MPPF is adopted, plus 1 month's grace, then you should proceed to examination, unless the difference between your number of houses to be provided in your local plan and the number of houses calculated under the new methodology is greater than 200, then you should go back to basics and follow the new MPPF. If you're not at Reg 19 stage, then in theory you should go back and do your plan again under the new MPPF. I would hope that there would be a little bit of flexibility over that, because at the moment we have all of our local district councils are intending to have Reg 19 plans in place by January, hopefully before the transitional arrangements expire. But we don't know. It seems a bit strange to me, using common sense, to say, well, yes, we're going to have a Reg 19 plan in place in January or February. The MPPF has come into force now. Let's go back to basics. It's going to be another 2 to 3 years before you get anything in place. At the moment, we've got a statement of common ground between the districts. We've agreed housing numbers. It's the actual practicalities of getting a report or a Reg 19 plan published and out there in the public arena before the MPPF bites.
Yeah.
I think just to sort of add on that, first of all, I think we should, I made the comment about the sort of mission statement slightly tongue in cheek, but the reality is this is incredibly ambitious, what's going forward here. And I think there are concerns at the timetable. I know some districts will want to think, well, if we get our plan through now, we'll miss those targets. We're going to have to deliver the houses, whether we like it or not. This is the proposal that's put forward. I think it's important that we do take a sensible approach to it and make sure that we feed back to that. But what we're actually facing here is hugely ambitious, and there are going to be a lot of problems along the way with that. If government wants to hit its targets, the difficulty will be in ensuring that we keep that keep the districts and borough councils working along with us, because the pressure that this puts on the county to actually provide this information, detailed, complicated information in time, is incredibly challenging. But on top of that, we talked also about these big strategic plans that are going on top of it. So there's a huge amount of work to do. I think it's important that we focus on that strategy rather than looking as our own individual areas.
Like.
Yeah, it's a connected question. And when I first got elected in 2009 to the county council, one of the major issues at that point in time was what they called the eco-town. It's under the last Labour government. And there's talk recently of that being resurrected around Pembury. How does that huge proposal fit into the National Planning Policy Framework? And may I remind everyone that Leicestershire County Council resisted that application at that point in time. I look forward to how this pans out in the near future.
The Stretton Hall proposals have no planning status. They've been put forward as a call for sites under the Harbour Local Plan Review, but it's not an allocated site. It has no planning status whatsoever. Speaking to Harbour, they feel that one of the reasons that particular site was put forward is it's in public ownership. So it could, in theory, be delivered quite quickly, and there are developers on board with it. But at the moment, it doesn't fit in because it doesn't have any status.
Okay. Thank you for that. Moved by Robert, seconded by me. Any other comments? No, we all in agreement? Thank you. On to item 13, the response to the Hinckley and Bosworth Regulation 18 draft local plan consultation, pages 503 to 508, and the supplementary agenda, pages 3 to 72. So this report advises of the current position of Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council's local plan and the County Council's position in respect of the latest period of consultation. Approval is sought for the proposed response, and again, you're both staying here for us to take us through this report. So over to you.
Chair. What before you is the Regulation 18 for Hinckley and Bosworth local plan, and this is looking at the plan period 2020 to 2041. The consultation extends until the 27th of September, and in it it has a different set of proposals to those that we've seen previously. We've had 4 previous consultations on this iteration of the local plan as it's been progressing. And Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council consider that there are some indications from the latest evidence that they've looked at that the 70%, 30% urban-rural split for new growth might not be deliverable. So they've sought to put forward a range of proposed allocations in their Regulation 18 for consideration. Now, the current timetable looks as if they will be moving towards the Regulation 19, which is their preferred option, in the later part of this year, early 2025. But as Julie's already outlined in relation to the earlier item, there could be some question mark over that timescale. In terms of the progression over that of the local plan to formal adoption and what it's looking to contain. The main aspects of the County Council's response are set out in paragraphs 39 to 91, which I will just briefly cover some of those key points. The other thing I would want to say as well is there are two appendices to this report. Appendix A covers the 62 questions, I think it was, that were posed in the consultation. And then Appendix B are previous consultation responses that were made from Transport colleagues that are being re-referred to Hinckley and Bosworth for their consideration. And they date to July 2021. So in terms of the actual content of the proposed response and the key aspects that we'd like to Hinckley and Bosworth to consider, the County Council wishes to give its continuous commitment to support Leicestershire districts to put up-to-date local plans in place, really recognising the cohesive planning policy is needed to plan for strategic infrastructure to support growth. Again, this links back in with part of the conversation that we've just been having on the previous item. Now, for this part of the county in the south, we've got joint transport evidence is being prepared, and that's for 4 districts in the south of the county. So that's Harborough District, Blaby, Oby and Wigston, and Hinckley and Bosworth Borough. And this approach is supported because of the connectivity and the cross-boundary implications of that area. And at the moment, this work is progressing well, but it isn't at a sufficiently advanced stage to inform key components of the local plan. Other wider unknowns and uncertainties also need to be reflected, in addition to the uncertainties arising from the government's proposed planning reforms. First off, we need to just mention, of course, the Hinckley National Rail Freight Interchange and the Development Consent Order delay in that decision. That has now been extended to the 10th of March 2025. Also, we've got the unclear position regarding the future investment on the strategic road network that we've just been referring to again earlier. And this local plan in particular is heavily reliant on such improvements. Issues regarding proposed allocations as well. There's one referred to in the local plan, Regulation 18, called Linley Meadows. It's proposed for 1,000 dwellings to come forward in the local plan period, 3,000 in total. There's not only the A5 issue to take into consideration here, but concern regarding active and sustainable travel. Geographically, the site is poorly located for modes other than travelling by the private car. And also we have concerns about the Barwell and Old Shilton Sustainable Urban Extensions. They've been allocated since 2009. They've been quite slow to come forward, and we're very supportive of them coming forward, but we note that there's an extension to the Old Shilton SUE that's proposed in the local plan. So we're very supportive that they're using the housing figures in the statement of common ground, again, that Julie referred to in the earlier item, which includes that apportionment for unmet need from the city. There are several pieces of evidence which either need updating or are still missing at the moment from the local plan. An example is a renewable energy capacity study, which remains dated at 2014. And we've got the level 2 strategic flood risk assessment coming along, and health improvement assessment too. And we referred earlier, of course, to the joint transport evidence. In brief, there are significant challenges and uncertainties that are facing not only Hinckley and Bosworth, but the wider Leicestershire area too. And we've sought to reflect in our response to Hinckley and Bosworth the concerns that we have, but also trying to also offer a route forward in how they can move forward with their local plan making. Janet, is there anything further you wanted to say in particular on the transport side?
I think it's just a living example of the discussion that we've had before. Effectively, absolutely understand the pressure that officers at Hinckley and Bosworth are under to produce that plan. But I think, you know, the issues Councillor Ashman mentioned in terms of the time pressures of getting the evidence to support those options alone is difficult. The issues around the strategic road network in the area. I think we're just trying to be really clear about our position on those challenges in this response, with the intention of enabling solutions to those challenges to be worked on. But they are significant, and we wanted to put those on record.
Thank you, Robert.
Yes, thanks very much, and thank you to your team on, the word challenge has come up quite a bit, and I think significant challenge on this particular plan, and it is encouraging to see progress on it, but it is a bit disappointing to see some of the other things that have some out of our control, like the Hinckley National Freight interchange, but we'll see what comes out from that. What I would like to say is why it's challenging is that this puts huge pressure on the departments, as well as all the other changes we got on top of this. And it is disappointing to see that, first of all, some of the advice or some of the comments that have been made in the past have been ignored, especially on the spatial development, but also not taking into account the consultations on, was it March 22 and September 21 in the former draft plan. And I think it's very important that those are actually addressed in this plan, because otherwise we will be going around in circles. It is the problem with having to deliver a higher level of housing across the country, but that's not going to go away, and we have to deal with that. So I do thank the team for the work that's been done on that, and I will hope that going forward we'll get these issues resolved sooner rather than later. Otherwise, it does mean that local plan will be pushed further down, especially, the other comment I was going to make beforehand is that there's going to be a huge amount of pressure on planning inspectorates to actually get these plans through, because they're all going to arrive at the same time. So the further these get pushed back, there could be some considerable delay, which is in no one's interest. So it's good to see progress being made, and I just hope that we can actually get those issues resolved in time.
Blake.
Happy to second the motion, and for what it's worth, I've always found the County Council in these respects to be quite transparent, and I welcome the fact that you're putting this on the record and laying these challenges bare. So happy to support and second.
And just to echo those words about the amount of work that's going into this plan and all the other plans that have gone and are coming forward as well, and just picking up that issue with the Barwell Zoo, I'm just checking the dates here. 2015 they were minded to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the Section 106, and we're still not there 9 years later. It's just such difficult to get this across, and we really need to work with everyone to get this across. Okay, lovely. Moved by Robert, seconded by Blake. Any comments from anyone else? No? All happy to approve? Thank you very much for all your work. Okay, item 14, probation health trainer service, outcome of the engagement and proposed decommission, pages 509 to 538. So this provides the outcome of the engagement on the proposed decommissioning of the probation health trainer service, and approval is sought for the end of the service. So Mike Sands, Director of Public Health, and Sally Vance, Head of Service for Public Health, will present this report. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand over to Sally. I need to note that it is an engagement. It's not a decision that required a formal consultation process, but we did want to do wide engagement with our stakeholders to help inform the proposed decommissioning proposal. So I'll hand over to Sally for the detail.
Thank you. Okay, to just take you through the sort of bare bones of the report. The Public Health Department currently hold a contract with a provider called Indius to offer the probation health trainer service. The service involves supporting people on release from prison. They assist with things like accessing your GP, getting registration, attending appointments, access to mental health services, so helping people refer themselves in or use those services, and access to benefits advice agencies. And we know that the prison population is at particular risk of poor health outcomes. So it's a population that we'd be concerned about in terms of inequalities of outcome. The service is currently in contract until the end of March 25, and we fund it to a value of £67,500 per year for the work that they do. As a public health department, we have a savings target of 90,000 for the 1st of April 25, and we've been asked to carry out a review of our commission services in order to achieve that. So we undertook a review of the probation health trainer service. That review showed a number of strengths with the service and a small number of limitations that are covered in the report. One of the key things that the review highlighted was that NHS England now fund a service called Reconnect service. So this is provided locally by LPT. It's a relatively new service that delivers care after custody. So this is designed to support people that have received health support within the prison as they come out into the community, and to offer a bridge between those prison services and those community health services. So it's designed to support people through that transition process. We also have local public health services that many of you will be aware of. So things like First Contact Plus that can help people with signposting and access to a wider sort of network of support services that exist, and services like our local area coordinator provision. So given this alternative provision that's available to the population, we went out to engagement on a proposal to decommission the service, the probation health trainer service, when the contract comes to an end. We've spoken to the provider of the service at the moment. We've spoken to people that use the service, and we've spoken to the probation service as the main referrers in. And we've also spoken to Reconnect to better understand their offer. So we did that primarily through a survey. We've had 49 surveys returned to us, 18 from service users, 18 from probation staff, and 13 from the provider themselves. And the provider has worked hard with us to help that engagement and support people to complete those returns. So the most common form of support accessed was GP registration and/or appointments. So accessing your GP was the most common, followed by referrals to mental health services and benefits advice and dentist registration or appointments. So these are all aspects of support that can be provided through that Reconnect offer. Overall, it was clear that the service is well thought of and supports people on release, but also that the probation service are stretched at the moment, and there was concerns there from the probation service about how they would be able to support people if the probation health trainer service were no longer there. So we have had those capacity concerns raised from the probation service. And I would suggest that if Cabinet do want to support the proposal here today, that we ensure that the probation service are well aware and able to use that Reconnect service. So sort of bridge that relationship if it needs any additional support between those two service areas. We also had concerns raised, of course, about the impact on people that use the service. And where they would go as an alternative, and again, the impact on their health. And as I've said before, I think raising awareness of that Reconnect offer to ensure that people that are leaving prison, as well as the services that refer in, are aware of that Reconnect offer will be important in sort of mitigating that risk. So overall, 78% disagreed with our proposal to decommission for the reasons I've set out largely here. 14% agreed and 8% neither agreed nor disagreed. We also took the proposal to Health Overview Scrutiny Commission, who asked us to look at whether we could access funding via the OPCC or the probation service themselves, given that impact on them. We've made contact with both of those agencies, but neither have been able to provide funding, certainly to this date. So in conclusion, the proposal here today is to decommission that probation health trainer service at the end of March when the current contract runs out. If Cabinet approves the recommendation today, we would carry out work in the interim period to ensure that the probation service themselves and the people that need the support are available of provision through are aware, sorry, of provision available through Reconnect and through wider public health services, and that there is a route to being able to make those referrals as needed.
And I'll just check really quickly for clarity. I've just seen that a lot of the service users that responded live in Leicester City. Is this just a service for Leicestershire?
Thank you. It's a service that the city also funds separately. We certainly asked that this was distributed to people using the Leicestershire service. We have picked up that issue. It's possible that where workers have completed the survey, they may be working across the city as well as the county areas. And for people themselves, it's possible that people use the service in the county but are now living in the city. So it's really difficult. We certainly asked that was completed for county residents, whether it's a case of people moving around or whether we have got some city residents that have completed. It's impossible to say.
Yeah, I was just going to chip in at the end. If you're looking at paragraph 23, thinking how do we get to a duplication with NHS England, my understanding was always under the 2012 Act that NHS England's responsibility was for the health of prisoners. Frankly, if they wish to extend that into providing services for care after custody, which then means we don't have to do it, I'm not going to stop them.
Thank you. Louise.
Thanks. I think it's always disappointing to have to reform targeted services that appear to be valued, but there is going to be duplication with this service, Reconnect from the NHS, and we do have First Contact Plus and the local area coordinators. So even though we're having to make these difficult decisions, we are ensuring that there are other services available to the adult offenders, so they're not left without assistance or support. So, you know, I think it is sensible to decommission this. Thanks. Oh, and I'll propose this. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine?
Thank you. I'm quite happy to second as long as the information is passed on to those leaving the prison. But of course, you've probably had a very busy week following the new government releasing extra prisoners. So yes, I take on board what Louise has said, that we've got other facilities than that to support the prisoners.
Mike?
Yeah, thank you. It is a good point. I mean, it has been a busy week, as you say, and obviously it's probably not the greatest time to put forward a decommissioning proposal. Having said that, the work of Bob Byrne in the probation service and the police as well in bringing a number of multi-agency partners together, it's actually meant we've had a really good conversation about letting them know about all the other services that public health and indeed the council provide, which can then help offenders as they're discharged. So you know, it's not something I would have wanted, but actually this almost kind of helped trial run and reinforce, if we don't have a specific service, this is the other services that are in place to help those that are being released from prison.
And just to reiterate that, I know Bob really well as well, and he's a really good partnership worker, so that's really good to hear as well. Did you want to come back?
Just to say thank you for that information.
No, Bobby's really good, and I think he understands our situation. We understand his situation. It has been a really difficult week with the early release of prisoners, and more to come, I think, in a few months' time as well. So yeah, like you say, not the greatest time, but the funding situation we're in, we can't afford to offer duplicate services. And I think we don't sit here to cut services. That's not what we were elected for. But if there is duplicate services, as long as those connections are made, which I think they will be through Bob, we will be in a good place. So proposed by Louise, seconded by Christine. All those in favour? Thank you. On to item 15, items referred from overview and scrutiny. There are none. Item 16, any other items which the Chairman has decided to take as urgent. There are none. On to item 17, exclusion of the press and public. This brings the public part of the meeting to a close, so thank you for attending. I now move that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 10 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, in that all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Are we all agreed? We'll just wait for the public to leave and the webcast to stop.